national security implications now and bring in Shadow Defence Minister Andrew Hastie. Joins me live from Parliament House in Canberra. Thanks for joining us, Andrew. Do you suspect that spy balloons such as this would have flown over the Australian continent?
It's a great question. We don't have any evidence that has occurred, but certainly it's something we can't rule out. And based on the US experience, it's possible.
What about this nonsense from China that it's a civilian device, a civilian experiment? There's nothing the Chinese Communist government does that's civilian, is there?
Look, I think it's fanciful to think it's anything but a deliberate act of statecraft by the PRC, either to collect intelligence through the means on board the balloon or to test the US reaction to such a move. But I think to just suggest that it's a weather balloon, I think is quite naive and mistaken.
Now, we understand they can control the direction of these devices quite effectively by, of course, altering or lowering the altitude and going with the prevailing winds. What do you think, what's your best advice as to what it was looking to do? Would it have been looking to get video, photographs and the like, visual imagery, or would it have been looking to intercept communications?
It's a really good question, Chris. I've asked for briefings on this and I'm no wiser than you on those questions. But I think it's important that we come back to fundamentals, and there are a few fundamentals here. Number one, it was a clear breach of US airspace and a violation of their territorial sovereignty. And two, I think the US was entirely justified, first, for Secretary Blinken to cancel his visit to Beijing, and secondly, to shoot it down. In fact, I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier. I'm not, of course, privy to the intelligence, so there was an operational reason for that. But certainly it was the right thing to do. And I think, the risk for miscalculation has increased. I think this is all very bad. And if we come back to the big picture and look at the last year in context, if we go back to, in fact, Beijing on the eve of the Winter Olympics, where Xi and Putin met and struck a no-limits partnership. Since then, we've seen the war in Ukraine unfold. We've seen China fire missiles over Taiwan in response to former Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. We've seen this balloon. Things are hotting up. They're not actually stabilising or normalising. And I think the fundamentals that drove the Defence Strategic Update, which Prime Minister Scott Morrison released in July of 2020, the reason that AUKUS was struck with the UK and the US, all those fundamentals are still in place. The authoritarian powers are on the move. Geopolitical unrest is occurring. Great power competition is taking place. Military modernisation is happening, and we have to respond as a country and secure our interests.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. We're talking here about a Chinese aircraft of some description being shot down over the US, a secret aircraft that was put there by the Chinese and has been shot down over the US. We've got the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken cancelling his trip to Beijing, which would have been a very important step in trying to address some of these difficult strategic issues. What does this mean for Australia then? Because we're looking at a thawing of relations, and we've got the Trade Minister Don Farrell heading to Beijing to talk with his Chinese counterpart. Should that visit go ahead, for instance?
We've seen Foreign Minister Wong's comments. You've seen Defence Minister Miles's comments, and the opposition supports those. As to the Trade Minister's visit or meeting with his Chinese counterpart, we must keep dialogue open. And this is the thing. The last thing we want is a conflict, because it's going to be middle powers like Australia and neighbours like Indonesia and Singapore and other countries through Asia who will suffer. So our job is to maintain the peace, to keep lines of communication open, even as we have been treated pretty poorly by the PRC over the last 4 or 5 years. We have to keep talking, and that's why we support ongoing dialogue with the PRC government.
All right. Now, I'm not suggesting Australia should lead this. We've been there with COVID-19 investigations, but surely all free nations need more explanations as to what was going on with this balloon. Surely, for instance, we ought to be expecting to hear from all NATO nations that they demand a full and frank explanation from China on this.
I think so. I mean, this is very significant. If you go back to the 60s, where a US U-2 aircraft was shot down, the pilot Francis Powers was captured. He wasn't there collecting weather data for the US government. He was conducting high-level surveillance. It was a spy plane, and it was shot down. So when you consider the context of this spy balloon, sure, there wasn't a pilot on board, but it's no less significant. And I think it's important to remember the risk of miscalculation, and we need to have a discussion. Things need to be put on the table, and we need to clear the air on this, because I'm not convinced it was a civilian platform conducting innocent weather data collection.
Indeed.
As some have suggested.
Yeah, exactly, as China has suggested. Now, Andrew Hastie, before I let you go, one other issue that's confronting the Liberal Party in Canberra at the moment, that is The Voice, with 50%, according to Newspoll, of Australians supporting it, with all the state leaders, Labor and Liberals, supporting the idea of a voice. Should Liberal politicians be at least given a free vote on this? If not the party supporting a voice, there should at least be a free vote?
Chris, I'm a member of the Shadow Cabinet. These are discussions that are internal to the Liberal Party at this point in time. Peter Dutton, our leader, has asked for his 15 questions to be answered. He wants more detail. I think it's an okay and reasonable ask. He's taking a very reasonable position, in fact, and we'd like to continue the dialogue with the government about these questions, because I know we have questions, the Australian people have questions, and I think more detail is only going to enhance the debate going forward. But as to how we position ourselves internally, that's something that will be discussed at Shadow Cabinet and in the party room in due course.
What's your personal view on the principle of a voice?
Look, I'm circumspect, and I'm waiting for more detail, which is a fair position to have. And I know a lot of fair-minded Australians on both sides of the debate, as you are, Chris.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Andrew Hastie there, the Shadow Defence Minister, live